All right, welcome to the Pangburn Philosophy Podcast. This is Travis Pangburn. Today I am joined by the polarizing British author and political commentator Douglas Murray, who is an outspoken critic of Islam and the European refugee crisis. In his newest book, The Strange Death of Europe, Immigration, Identity, Islam, Murray explores two main factors that explain why European civilization as we know it will not survive. Thanks for taking the time today, Douglas.
Very good to be with you.
Great. So the word polarizing, I've noticed, is frequently used to describe you. Why is that?
Yeah, I have to say I'm slightly surprised myself. I don't think anything I say is especially polarizing. I've been a writer since since I've been grown up, and written on all sorts of things, published books on literature, on history, on politics, on terrorism. But it's true that every issue to do with what I write about in my latest book is a hot potato issue, as we would say in Britain. But, my view is that the only point of writing, and like the only point of thinking, is to try to get to some truth. And it happens sometimes that the truths that you're trying to get to involve you going through received wisdom, involve you walking against certain crowd mentalities of your time. And I've certainly found that's the case with this latest book. I mean, it's been a bestseller in every country it's come out in so far. And it's been published around the world in multiple languages. And to my mind, it tries to cut through a set of fallacies that I think we've fallen into. But if anything is polarizing, as it were, it's just that the facts I'm looking at, the facts I've looked into for years and have traveled across the globe looking at for years, are very, very difficult and awkward facts.
Yeah.
But, you only have two options in the face of that. One is to try to unpick them, however popular or unpopular it is, and the other is to lie. And I know a lot of writers who take that second option, but I've never seen it as being worth doing.
One writer that comes to mind recently is Ezra Klein. How he, it seems like a guy like him, he would rather hide scientific findings if they don't happen to fall in line with the wishful thinking.
I think, by the way, that's a very common thing at the moment. I mean, maybe it always was, but there is this tendency to just try to avoid and shut down facts and ideas if they are awkward to you and to your received wisdom. And, I, at any rate, would like to think, and I think I have in my career, have shown that, if the facts change, then my opinion's going to change. And if I discover facts I didn't know, then they're going to have an impact, and they should.
Yeah.
But it is amazing how many people like Klein are willing to just block them off, shut people down, shut them up. I don't see it working, but... Yeah,
this is measles vaccine avoidance type of thinking. That gets people into trouble. It's this poison of anti-science. It's interesting that you brought up truth there. So I've recently did a podcast and an event with Jordan Peterson, and he was actually on stage with Matt Dillahunty, who you'll be on stage with a week from today in New York, and truth. With Jordan in a lot of his talks with other thinkers becomes this huge topic, because the other speakers tend to be shocked by how much Peterson, how much weight he puts on this idea of metaphoric truth, and it should somehow be taken as seriously as the truths that we find through science, even if they're just temporary.
Right. This is a landmine issue in this area at the moment.
Right.
But I think I see what Jordan is getting at there. But yes, I can see also why some people resent the idea of metaphorical truth being put on the same plane as demonstrable scientific truth, for instance.
Right.
It's almost as if you need another word in the language for the thing that he's quite rightly trying to bring to people's attention there. Like truth with a capital T or a lowercase t, for instance. I don't know, something like that.
Exactly. And I mean, a lot of us in the secular humanist community kind of look at that as kind of the new wave of Christian apologetics, where, they're kind of putting God into this untestable realm. I mean, I can't see I can't see a circumstance where in Jordan Peterson's way of understanding truth, where things like Santa Clauses and leprechauns and anything you wish up or imagine all of a sudden is brought into existence.
Right. No, it's we have to concede that we are, though, at the moment in some kind of, I don't like to say interim period, but there is so much churn going on at the moment in the world of ideas as we're trying to adapt to certain facts and truths that we've discovered, and that indeed have gone sweeping across the culture, and for good in large part, but also partly for ill. And everyone's trying to find a way to reason their way through this, and I'm not sure we're all going to arrive at any consensus very soon, but once you accept that this is the middle of some very significant churn in the culture, it makes me at any rate slightly more relaxed about the interim period.
Yeah, I think it's a move in the positive direction. I think the more or the less people we have walking around thinking that they have the supreme beings on their side, I think this is where belief in supreme beings, you can fall into a trap of smothering your child, thinking that you're doing the right thing by delivering them to God. Yeah, so we have the event coming up in New York, and just a bit on Matt Dillahunty. So Matt's a former Southern Baptist of 25 years. He sought to be a minister. He found his way out of religion, and now is quite a prominent figure in the promotion of positive atheism and secular humanism. So I assume you guys are definitely going to be getting into the discussion about Christianity's role in human history, and maybe if there was a different way or a better way, or was this essentially inevitable, as I've heard from Brett Weinstein recently, and kind of his take on religion.
Right. Yes. I mean, this is another thing that's now being really significantly fought over, and you just take a step back from the everyday's news, and you can see that the elements of this debate are going on all the time and very feverishly. There's a case in Britain at the moment, obviously where I'm from, about a poor young boy who's ill, and is an issue about whether the doctors have made the right calls about withdrawing life support and all this sort of thing. And it's become, this boy's name is on everybody's lips in the UK, and there's a massive campaign by, among others, Catholic groups and others, and there's you just take a step back from that, which is just this tragic, awful thing that's happening at the moment, but take a step back from it, and you realize actually, this is all being fought over in this same terrain, this sort of intermediary terrain, of trying to work out what the sort of new rules are, and what our own presumptions are about ethics, including medical ethics. And it's, as I say, you can get a certain amount of peace from the simple realization that we're trying to work out how we got to where we've got to, as well as where we're going next. Right. And what role religion played in that, and which bits we discard, or whether we discard it completely. And this is gonna rumble on for a long time.
Yeah, a lot of people do hold the opinion that if we would have discarded with religion earlier on, it may have been catastrophic because it was used as a bit of a guide. I think I see ways that if we would have kind of essentially, for lack of a better term, put our faith in things like art independently from, believing that supernatural personal gods exist, that maybe that would have fulfilled that void, but maybe it is that fear of the all-powerful God that kept people in check through history.
It's also possible that we're just wired in a certain way. I mean, yeah. I've read quite a lot on this, that even if, as you say, for instance, you got to art without religion playing any part, with no certainty that somehow you wouldn't create a religiosity around art.
Right.
I mean, there are plenty of people who, for instance, confuse religion and aesthetics, and vice versa. So it may be that Brett knows this better than anyone, but maybe there's a wiring issue on this.
Yeah, I think Brett is convinced of that.
It's a fascinating subject on the subjects like altruism and all of these things. It's an extraordinary, very, very deep and important discussion to have.
Right. And then we'll be in Dublin on July 14th and London July 16th. You will be, I think I'm going to sit it with you in between Sam and Jordan. Maybe you're the more reasonable person in this crowd.
I might keep them apart, like
right.
a boxing moderator.
Yeah.
No, I'm looking forward to these events as well, very much. I know Sam pretty well, and I've known him for some years, and I know Jordan less well, but have followed him for some time, and have a very great amount of sympathy with both of their points of view and arguments on various things, differ from both on various points, but it's going to be a really, really interesting evening in Dublin, and again then in London. And looking forward to a packed out arena.
On Sam and Jordan, they've been poking at each other a bit on Twitter and kind of doing the pre-boxing match weigh-in, peacocking. Sam and Jordan are both very reasonable people, as far as I can tell, and the stuff I've heard them talk about. I mean, the way what Jordan has to provide on the side of self-authoring and anything really directly related to clinical psychology, I think he's a genius on those subjects. But then I get perplexed, and I have a hard time understanding his position when it comes to truth, and it comes to he seems to be struggling. I've talked to him about his God belief, and I actually think he, under my definition of what atheism is, I think he is an atheist.
Right. Well, this is a very interesting subject in itself. I don't want to presume anything, and this isn't on the basis of a particular conversation with
right.
Jordan, but my impression is that, among other things, this isn't to diminish his thought on this matter, but there is a type of person who, I think, for instance, of the English philosopher Roger Scruton, who is, in my guess, almost certainly an atheist, but believes that there is a damage done by admitting that publicly, or taking too strident a stance in such a direction. This is something, by the way. This is something which Schopenhauer talked about almost 200 years ago in the dialogue on religion. What he describes as the tragedy of the clergy, that the clergy can't admit that what they're doing is talking in metaphor. They can never admit that, or the whole thing stops.
Right.
Because you can't get people to follow a metaphor. So I understand that particular predicament. I'm not certain that's where Jordan is, but it's one possibility. And as I say, I can think of other cases of prominent thinkers who basically hold that sort of almost clerical line. And it, again, I mean, it's understandable in a way. If you take that view, then it's understandable you wouldn't want to admit or confess certain things in public for the damage they might do. But I think it's more than that as well with Jordan. There is something I've seen in other thinkers like Richard Holloway, who used to be the Bishop of Edinburgh and who sort of became an atheist whilst he was bishop. He, I think, probably he's in a similar space to where Jordan is, I think, and where I have some sympathy with of not wanting to discard the whole story,
right?
In case, but I recognize, for instance, that the stories of the Bible, for instance, are not. Could be seen as being like the work of Ovid,
right.
But nobody believes that the metamorphosis occurred now. But we recognize that they carry truth, a story of some truth about human desire, for instance, in the case of the metamorphosis of Daphne, and longing and so on. And I think we recognize it, but I think that there is obviously this problem in relation to doing this with biblical story, which is the very strong response from believers, which is, look, if it's not true, then it's nothing.
Right.
So people walking that tightrope, and it is a tightrope, have a very difficult job.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, it is high wire stuff.
Yeah, if you have, anyone who's trying to argue a position where they don't have evidence, and they don't have at least evidence for the kind of truth that's practical in reality, because I'm not sure that metaphoric truth has any practicality as far as understanding what is actually real. But I sure as hell wouldn't want the task of trying to defend that position. I've tried to put myself on that side, and it's mean I can't get over the fact, if I'm trying to come at it from a theistic perspective, that Superman, any of these characters that we've created, essentially could be wished into existence in this. If a lot of people took it seriously.
I think I would put it another. I wouldn't say wished into existence. I'd say wished out of existence in a way. Because do you remember? I'm sure he was a friend of yours. But the late friend Christopher Hitchens used to have this very strong argument about believers having all of their work ahead of them.
Right.
Do you remember that?
Right. Yes.
It's
yes.
a great riff of Christopher's.
Yeah.
And but I think that you can also say that the inverse is true to some extent, which is that there has been a presumption in the last couple of decades in particular, among some people in the atheist community, that once you demonstrated the illogical, unprovable nature of belief, that everything else was sort of clear.
Yeah.
And I've always taken the view that no, again, your work starts from there. For instance, on ethics, some people, I don't think this is the case now when we're already clearly into a much more textured, complex and necessarily complex part of the discussion about ethics. But I think, in the last 15 years, there have been a lot of people who gave the impression that, if you do away with God, then the rest is obvious. And actually, the former chief rabbi in the UK once said to me, said people present their ethics as being self-evident when they're self-evidently not. And I write about this quite a bit in my most recent book. What happens when a culture starts to worry that ethics it took for granted might be quite unusual, globally speaking. And that's not, by the way, just religious. I think of it in terms of liberal politics as well. I think a lot of people getting nervous that the presumptions we have made about the predominance of a certain attitude within politics might actually be some kind of terrible, but wonderful, but a blip.
Yeah.
So these underneath all of these discussions at the moment are these tremors, as I see it, of a general realization that we might need to shore some of this up. Some people in that will definitely seize on parts of religion to help them sort of shore it up. But others, we've got a lot of work to do.
Yeah, well, on the regressive left, we have this thug mentality created out of essentially trigger culture, and we have these gangs of far lefties showing up to silence free speech. We have it in Canada all the time, and
it's incredible development. This. It's like a form of secular inquisition in a way. It's a very worrying development, and it has to be countered unbelievably vociferously. Because we currently have these assaults happening from the ground up in groups like the ones just mentioned, and also to some extent from the top down. I mean, in Scotland earlier this week, in the week we're talking, a young man was now 30, but was fined, and he was charged and sentenced for a crime of causing offence for what was a joke video, a case of somebody called Count Dankula was his YouTube name, and this guy was totally sort of obscure. But a joke he made about relating to his girlfriend's pug dog,
right,
ended up going to court, and he could have gone to prison. And so there are quite a lot of people in very prominent positions, as well as in the sort of thuggish, street sort of movements that are starting to try to get this stuff in their sights. There are a lot of top-down movements as well to basically say, if we're all going to get along, you've got to shut up.
Yeah, it's not a great time to be a comedian out there. You could, you really got to bite your tongue. I know the case you're talking about. I think the dog. I think it was a Heil Hitler thing, wasn't it?
He. I mean, it's sort of, as always. The problem with those of us who defend free speech is you very rarely get to defend free speech on the basis of the Areopagitica or somebody trying to burn the collected works of Marcel Proust. It tends to be like this case, and it's always laborious. But yeah, this guy, his girlfriend was always going on about how cute her pug dog was, and she left the pug with him, and he thought it would be amusing to make the pug dog the least cute thing imaginable, i.e. a Nazi. And taught the pug dog to raise its right paw when he said, do you like Hitler? Things like
that.
But,
right.
Which, you either like that stuff or you don't like it. You laugh or you don't laugh, and that's the end of it in any sane culture. But no, in Scotland, because obviously the constabulary up there had managed to solve every murder, rape, robbery and burglary in the area. Obviously, they solved all of them. So they moved on to policing the jokes being carried out on YouTube, and but this stuff really just has to be countered everywhere you find it.
Yeah, definitely. And then we will be going down to Auckland, New Zealand for August 11th, and Sydney, Australia for August 12th, and we'll be down there with Sam Harris, Brett and Eric Weinstein, and Majid Nawaz.
Majid Nawaz, yeah.
Yeah, and I think
I can't wait for that.
Yeah, I really did I leave anyone out? No, I think I got and Josh Zepps will be hosting.
Right.
Yeah, I think there's a really interesting conversation to be had between you and Majid, because he He seems to be quite not apologetic for Islam in the sense that he apologizes for any violence, but I think he believes in a significant amount of utility, and there's a reason why Islam should be reformed as opposed to eradicated.
Right. I mean, I'm not sure. I've known Majid for more than a decade, I think now. I met him first when he came out of jail in Egypt, and when he was a radical. I mean, he is, to my mind, one of the most hope-causing people imaginable.
Yeah, no kidding, no kidding.
He's shown that people can change, and I've seen it with my own eyes. I mean, 80 years ago in New York, he was on the opposite side of a big debate with against me and my friend Ayaan Hirsi Ali, and right. we debated whether the religion of his upbringing and his religion, Islam, is a religion of peace or not. And Ayaan and I were very strongly of the opinion that it is certainly not a religion of peace.
Right.
And he was trying to argue the opposite. And it was a classic example of a heated debate actually producing some light, because a lot of things came from that evening, including a book he did with Sam
right.
in the end. But a lot of things came from that evening, and it showed, I think, that if you have issues out, I mean, I've always got a lot of flack for criticizing Islam, and everyone who does it does. But, if you actually have these things out fearlessly and freely, you can make a hell of a lot of progress.
Yeah.
If people stop being terrified, there's a lot you can get done in terms of, pointing to certain obvious absurdities in claims that are made. And you can do it in a respectful way as well, I mean, I don't know what Majid's thoughts are about some of this, but I mean, I think that at the very least, we have to recognize that 1.6 or whatever it is billion people are not going to suddenly apostatize.
Right.
And so anyone who does, good luck, but if you want to sort of get through some of the troubles that the Islamic world are having at the moment, putting some hope in reform, and really some people really working at reform within that faith is if you pardon the joke, I mean, is the Lord's work.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I've talked to a lot of people on Islam reform and on kind of either side of that debate, and my sense is we do have a limited amount of intellectual real estate to devote to these wars of ideas, as Sam Harris puts it, and I wonder if our time is better spent in the Richard Dawkins fashion of firebrand atheism, or right. if the results for the reason side are going to increase with that, or opposed to going at it and putting a bit of a protective blanket over it, like reformists do, and
right.
that kind of helps to even slow down the effect that the firebrand humanists can have on those communities.
Well, look, I mean, I've been through a lot of this over the last almost 2 decades, and have known almost all the people involved at the coal face. And my own view has always been that you probably need what we would call horses for courses. And, if someone wants to run full tilt right at the center of the religion and just expose the whole thing, then good luck,
Yeah.
If somebody else believes in a kind of syncretic form of Islam catching on, or, good luck. I think that the thing which some people recognize, you alluded to it in saying it might be too late for some of the longer time span things, like when people sort of say, I think in the next millennium we can probably get Islam to draw in it. I think that the thing that is not going to work is what basically most Western governments have decided in recent years to do, which is to lie about the nature of that religion and hope that the general public don't read.
Right.
Because we're past that stage, because you can't pretend it is things that it isn't, because we've all got access to Google these days, and we've all got access to the texts, and we don't take it on trust when the Secretary of State or someone tells us something about a religion. We can find out for ourselves, and I think that this sort of general Western, establishment, for want of a better term, political establishment view that you lie about the nature of the religion and hope that everyone believes you is just unsustainable. I mean, I don't know if you saw, there was a fascinating conversation Sam Harris had with Russell Brand a little while ago. I couldn't believe that Sam managed to keep his temper. I mean, he just always does, because he's such a nice guy.
It's the psychedelics. I just exploded. Yeah. But at one point, Russell Brand says, the way I see it, Islam is, blah blah blah, and Sam says, have you read the Quran? Yeah.
And Russell Brand says, I ain't got time to read the Quran. You think, well, shut up then. Yeah. Don't speak. If you don't have time to read, don't speak.
Yeah. Don't say it's a doctrine of peace. And
he went straight on to say, I ain't read the Quran, but the way I see it, Islam is just blah blah blah.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of people who do that, actually. Look, I don't know the facts, but I reckon X.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of people who do that, and let's face it, there's a lot of people for whom it's like great hope. I mean, it's like, I think that basically Islam must be like yoga and Buddhism,
Yeah.
And I always say, well, good luck.
Yeah.
Good luck with that idea.
Just all it takes is a quick Google search of the top commandments or the top wishes of Allah or teachings of Muhammad, and it's quite clear after a very, very brief bit of work put in that this is not a religion of peace.
Well, as sometimes a reader sums this up best, and I had a reader who wrote to me recently an email saying, I've been interested in what you've written over the years, but I haven't sort of delved into it recently, but very much myself. But he said, I just read the Quran, full stop. Religion of peace, my arse.
Yeah, that's essentially my reaction to.
But I understand the problem and the conundrum beyond that. I mean, this gets into really deep territory, because I understand the problem beyond that, which is it worth saying that very much,
Right.
And what about all the people who don't know what their religion says and believe that their God is really kind and that the messenger was the most perfect man, and suddenly these people come along and go, you're so wrong about the nature of the thing which is the most important in your life.
Yeah, exactly. And
it's tricky.
Yeah, and the further you go down the line of apologetics, the harder it is to pin down anything. And I mean, then the whole book becomes metaphor, and then you're basically in a new realm of truth. So I mean, you've done a lot of public criticizing of Islam, and has that had an effect on your, are you constantly looking over your shoulder? Do you feel like you're being hunted ever, or what's that like?
No, not hunted. No.
Yeah.
I've had a lot of trouble from it.
Yeah.
Which I don't go into much detail about, and but yes, I mean, particularly in the continent I'm from, I mean, a lot of friends have been shot at. Yeah. So it's there are easier career paths that I would urge. But look, as I said at the very beginning, if you do want to write and speak, and you do it because you have a genuine interest in ideas and in getting to truth, then I mean, what bigger subjects are there around in our day than these? I could devote myself to horticulture, but it doesn't interest me.
Right. Well, some of us, I mean, as far as I can tell, all of us human beings are at the mercy of our pleasure drive, and some people get a lot of pleasure out of going to the same coffee shop every morning and grabbing the same bagel, having the same coffee, and that's a highly pleasurable pursuit. But some people are pleasure junkies, and they don't get the same levels of pleasure out of the ordinary things. So I meet a lot of people of the latter. Thanks a lot for coming on today. I really look forward to meeting you in person next week, and we'll go for dinner before the event, and it'll be a fun time in New York.
Definitely looking forward to it, and looking forward to Dublin and London and Auckland and Sydney.
Yeah, it's going to be a ton of fun. There'll be some drinks had and some good food eaten for sure.
Well, now you're talking.
Where are the aliens?
Okay. Well, we live in a random corner in the far edge of the Milky Way galaxy. Fermi's paradox is that, well, look, if life evolved, it would basically colonize the galaxy, and you could calculate it would send out robots or parts of its civilization to 4 other planets that would, instead of 4 other planets, and everything would grow exponentially. It's not a bad logic, but I don't think it's inevitable.
We are electric men. We've got electric hands, so come stand beside us and realize that the thing we must do is inspire. We're coming for you.
We are about to get in our hands the tools that may help us prove for once and for all that we're not alone. And I'm talking specifically about the James Webb Space Telescope and the Square Kilometre Array Radio Telescope. My point is that the next generation of telescopes, both optical and radio, will, I think, show us a very crowded cosmos.
I wrote a piece saying whatever they are, they're not aliens.
The good news, I think, is that ours is likely to be the generation that will make that profound, game-changing discovery that it's not just us.